Why do they still call me a warlord? And mad? All I want to do is to create the perfect genetic soldier. Not for power, not for evil, but for good. Carlos Blanca will be the first of many. They shall march out of my laboratory and sweep away every adversary, every creed, every nation, until the very planet is in the loving grip of the Pax Bisonica. And then peace will reign in the world, and all humanity shall bow to me in humble gratitude.
Welcome to Trash Cannon, and today I am very pleased to introduce my guest, Zaki Hasan, who wanted to discuss Street Fighter today. Say hi to the good folks at home.
How's it going? I was going to say, thanks for having me back, but I just realized that this is like Redux Street Fighter. So you and I had a very special conversation about this movie that will remain just between us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's lost to the ages, except in our hearts and minds.
Yeah, we had some technical difficulties, which I've had a different technical difficulty with every one of these episodes I've recorded, but hopefully that ends today. But we'll see. But Zaki has been very generous to talk about Street Fighter with me again today.
The way I look at it, there's sort of an ironic symmetry in the fact that we've had technical difficulties talking about this movie that basically is one giant technical difficulty. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, and actually it kind of works out because since then, Steam, the video game service, had a sale, and I actually, on a whim, picked up a discounted copy of Street Fighter V. And I don't know, have you played it, Zaki, or do you know anything about it?
I mean, I own it. I own all the Street Fighter games because I have PlayStation, like the Street Fighter Legacy or some such thing. But I'm at that age now where I couldn't begin to tell you the difference between one version and the other.
Yeah, that's all right, because I was looking forward to telling you that that the one of the new fighters in the game is an Arab named Rashid.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he in Capcom's promotional material. I mean, they emphasize Ryu or Ryu. I don't know. I just stick to Ryu because that's what I called him when I was a kid. Like all ignorant Americans. But there's actually, and I couldn't find it now if you had a gun to my head, but I know Rashid was called by Capcom's own promotional material as the hero of Street Fighter V story. So that's something you might want to bring up on your own podcast, Diffuse Congruence.
Yeah, that's right. I may need to. Yeah,
I mean, he's kind of, I mean, you know, because it's Street Fighter and it's Japan, there's like little stereotypes, like, you know, he dresses up like a sheik and, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, it's mostly harmless, superficial stuff. Although one thing that people might find problematic is the fact that his rival in the game is a member of the IDF in Israel. No, I'm joking. That was a joke. I'm sorry. That was way too topical for the show. Anyway, everything else is was true though. But yeah, could you tell me a little bit about your experience with Street Fighter? You mentioned that you were a fan of it, or any?
I mean, I think fan might be overstating it. Are we talking about the game or the movie?
Yeah, the games, just the franchise in general.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was necessarily a fan, but I was aware of it because growing up in the early to mid 90s, you couldn't not be aware of it. I mean, it really did have a level of cultural penetration in that age bracket. Obviously, that was such that, it was just sort of part of the conversation. So I knew who all the characters were. I knew the mythology, etc. Even as I did not play the game very much because I didn't own a Nintendo or Super Nintendo. So, the extent of my playing it would be whenever I happened to, go to a friend's house and they had it. So I did like it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I was, I wasn't soaking in it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah,
I wasn't purposely soaking in it. Let's put it that way. I was it was getting splashed on me. That metaphor could be gross, but
yeah, that's an interesting visual there. But yeah, I mean, I had a copy of Street Fighter Turbo, I think, and for the SNES, and I actually I have a memory of finding the arcade for the very first Street Fighter 2 when I was on vacation. But the thing, I was always actually a Mortal Kombat fan, and I mentioned this last time, but like one of the most intense arguments, more intense than even political debates I get into nowadays, was when I was 14, and it was with a guy who was at least 3 years older than me about whether or not Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat had the better gameplay. And to be honest, like the appeal of Mortal Kombat over Street Fighter for me was of course, the gore, but also like the whole dark fantasy angle to Mortal Kombat. But Street Fighter does kind of, I mean, I've never been a big fan of Bruce Lee movies or things like that, but I mean, just sort of the over-the-top 70s martial arts inspiration for Street Fighter has always kind of attracted me too. And the fact that Street Fighter and pretty much every other fighting game has like a richer mythology behind it than you would imagine. But anyway, the movie. So the movie came out in 1990. I had it in my notes. 4. That's right.
Yeah.
It was released
late 94.
Yeah, it was Christmas, and the interesting thing is like that Capcom had more input into what the game would be than even the studio, and Capcom's demands tended to be more fairly unrealistic because they literally wanted every single fighter from the game in the movie, and they actually pulled it off. Except that there's one character who's not in it, Fei Long. So the story is that the Capcom wanted a specific actor to play Ryu, but the studio gave the role to someone else. So they stuck the actor in as another character named Captain Sawanda.
Okay.
And for some reason, they didn't name Captain Sawanda Fei Long, even though it's clear that that's kind of the character they were thinking of. So that's why Fei Long is the only character from the games at that point in history who isn't in the movie. Yeah, and so the movie was the directorial debut of famous screenwriter Stephen De Souza, who is most well known for writing Die Hard, 48 Hours, and also one of my favorite movies, which if I remember correctly, Zaki, you haven't heard of, The Return of Captain Invincible.
Right, you mentioned that to me.
Yeah, Christopher Lee's in it. It's a great movie. I only found out about it because of the clip of the character playing the President of the United States singing bullshit over and over again.
Bullshit! Bullshit! Bullshit, 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 bullshit! Bullshit! Bullshit, 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 bullshit! 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 Bull, 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 bull! Shit, 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 shit! Bullshit, 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 bullshit!
But
I mean, here's something random.
Sure.
Steven D'Souza just yesterday liked a tweet of mine.
That's awesome.
Completely random, but yeah, that's a real thing that just happened. So.
Oh, what tweet was it?
It was, Kumail Nanjiani put out a tweet about how somebody yesterday in LA was like, go back to your own country, and so I have you seen the Twilight Zone, the pilot episode?
Yeah.
So you know the premise of the episode, right? That the Kumail Nanjiani episode, the new Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
So I like quote tweeted him, and I was like, twist ending, that guy now never existed. And Steven D'Souza liked that tweet. I was like, all right. The guy who wrote Die Hard liked my little piece of creativity there. So.
I was about to say, now let's hope he's not listening, because I'm also going to bring up that he also did Beverly Hills Cop 3, Judge Dredd, not the good one,
yeah,
but the one.
Well, I call that the gloriously bad one, because it is a bad movie, but it is a gloriously bad movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a whole separate episode for your show.
It is. Hopefully we'll cover it sometime, because I actually went to the theater with my dad to see that one.
Oh, jeez.
And my dad loved it. So Street Fighter kind of heralded a not so good 90s for him, like a surprising number of creators. Actually, they all seem to have great hits in the 80s, and then by the 90s it just went flop side.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, because I'm also thinking of the Baby's Day Out guy.
John Hughes?
Yeah, John Hughes. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, John Hughes syndrome.
I love that you're calling him the Baby's Day Out guy. Like, not Home Alone, not Breakfast, not Breakfast Club, not Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. The Baby's Day Out guy. That's truly what have you done for me lately?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of how much Mr. Plinkett I've been consuming recently. I recently rewatched the Baby's Day Out review, which you all should listen to after you listen to this. All right. So let's, of course, I guess we should start by just talking. I guess probably the best thing to do is to talk about the best part of the movie, which is the performance by Raul Julia, of course, which seems to be the only thing people remember about it nowadays. Raul Julia plays in Bison, who kind of like in the games is a, dictator type. Raul Julia only agreed to do the role because his grandkids were fans of the franchise, and he allegedly put so much effort into the role that he studied the mannerisms of dictators and things like that.
Wow.
But yeah, but he also gets the best writing, which is kind of a problem because the tone of the movie is so inconsistent. But I don't know, what's some of your favorite M. Bison moments from the movie?
I mean, the truth is that Raul Julia is just a joy for all of this. I mean, he is next level. He's doing Othello, you know?
Yeah.
He doesn't care that what kind of movie they've dropped him into the middle of. And I love that. I think, you know, the speech that he gives to Ming Na, where he's like, you know, she's like, I remember the day you killed my father and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, for you, that was the most important day of your life. To me, that was Tuesday.
Yes.
That's like, I mean, that's one of those things where you want to memorize that speech and just use it. Like you want to hold it in your heart and deploy it. Like you search your entire life for the exact moment to use that speech and hope that there's one person in the room who will get exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite line also, though, as a struggling academic is, after I crush my enemies, we'll see about getting you published.
Oh, that's great.
I love that line. And also just like all the concepts of the character, like the fact that, you know, he wants to start his own world currency, bison bucks, and
right.
You know, there's a line about him wanting to kidnap the Queen of England, and you know, stuff like that. Also, I wanted to bring up that you know, you said you watched this movie with your kids.
Yes.
Did any of them notice the painting of Bison as a clown?
I'm fairly certain they didn't.
Okay.
Because you telling me about it is the first I'm sort of like it. I feel like that knowledge existed somewhere in the recesses of my brain pan, but you know, you're firing some neurons. So.
Well, yeah. Well, do you know what that's a reference to?
I really don't.
It's a reference to John Wayne Gacy, because Gacy
painted clowns.
Yeah, when he was in prison, based on his own foray as a clown. And I guess the implication is either that Gacy painted, because the clown is wearing a little bison dictator general cap. And I guess the implication is that Gacy drew a special painting for him because Bison was a fan. But,
gotcha.
But no, sorry. For those who don't know, Zaki has some fairly young kids. And honestly, I just have like this visual of you trying to explain the concept of a serial killer to them. And I was, but in the future, if that conversation does happen, you can always like call me up and say, "Hey, Uncle Chad will explain."
You guys don't get it, man. You don't get it.
All right. Now, kids, every once in a while, there's a very special individual who can only achieve sexual pleasure or find meaning in their life through killing another human being, or if not the act of killing, doing something with their remains.
Any questions?
The moral of the story is don't become don't become a drifter, kids. Drifting is a very bad idea.
Yeah.
You will either become the serial killer or the victim. Anyway. But yeah, Raul Julia is by far the best part of the movie, because, and I think that's in no small part because like there's actually, as a Street Fighter adaptation, there really isn't any street fighting in
it. Right.
Like there's a scene where Ryu and Ken are about to get into a fight with in a street arena, and in the movie they're just like a couple of wacky traveling con artists rather than the, you know, students of a famous martial artist that they are in the games, because right. You know, which is really kind of frustrating, and I guess the parallel there is to how the Mortal Kombat movie made Sub-Zero and Scorpion into a couple of voiceless goons when right. You know, their story of tragedy and revenge is like the most interesting thing in the game's mythology, and they just leave it out. But like the idea that, Ryu is like the serious traditional Japanese martial artist and Ken is his, like this beach bum American counterpart who takes it seriously but doesn't take it seriously, and they have like this friendship / rivalry, and like they didn't, that isn't incorporated at all into the movie.
Yeah, I think it's what this movie does with Ryu and Ken feels more egregious to me anyway than Mortal Kombat with Sub-Zero and Scorpion, because to a large extent Ryu and Ken were perceived as the heroes of Street Fighter, like the main characters, even as it's an ensemble, right? So
yeah,
I think, again, my history was not as somebody who necessarily played the game regularly, but I knew enough to be like, well, Ryu and Ken, they're the guys. So, and I knew for sure that Guile was not, right? It's fascinating to me because it really does feel like they signed Van Damme and then they were like, well, shit, now what? Now who does he play? And they just threw darts at a board and landed on Guile,
Yeah, and it's frustrating because, like, the movie's visuals are actually pretty on point with the game. Like, the arena that Ryu and Ken are about to fight Vega in, that's actually an accurate reconstruction of the Vega's arena in the games.
Oh, okay.
And I think you also see the character Sagat's arena at some point in the game. And there's like all these little visual elements, but yeah, when Ryu and Ken are about to, actually enter into, or maybe it's just Ryu. I can't remember. But just to be honest. When they're actually about to enter into like this no bars hold mixed martial arts type tournament, Gal busts in and busts it up. And I think, I don't know, I want to get your opinion. Do you think there was like a scene edited out? Because honestly, it just like, it looks like there's the fight scene about to happen, and then all of a sudden it cuts to Gal driving his tanks through the wall. So I kind of wonder if there was like a little bit of a fight scene that they edited out, which would mean that like the one instance of street fighting in the whole movie,
based on how slapdash the entire film is, I certainly would not be surprised to know that,
Yeah, it just felt like a really quick edit.
Right.
Oh yeah, and I should probably throw in a little bit of trivia there. That the reason the movie is slapdash is like Capcom wanted a Christmas 1994 release, which gave them a year, 2 years to put the whole movie together. I think.
Right.
It was something really limited, a really limited time frame. But yeah, like the movie, people have said that it's like a better G.I. Joe adaptation than Street Fighter because, it's like the whole plot involves a UN expeditionary force. And this is, of course, in the era of, the U.S. intervention in Bosnia and everything. And that's obviously what's inspired it. And, trying to bring down this dictator in Bison who, in this world, Chandelou is not a criminal organization. It's like a dictatorship, although they kind of kept in the element of Ben Bison being a criminal because there's a line about him using the international drug trade to fund these weapons that are superior to those of any other nation state in the country somehow. Which that's okay. I'm talking about the Street Fighter movie, though, so I shouldn't. But there's also the subplot about Chun-Li and her friends trying to get revenge on M. Bison, which I think is the strongest of the plot threads. But, it gets overshadowed by Gal, who ends up undermining all the other heroes' actions, which, is totally something that you should write one of your protagonists as doing.
Yeah.
And it does lead into like the one moment that almost ruins even M. Bison as Raul Julia when he like wags a finger at them and says, "You should have worked together." Yeah.
Right.
Because at some point Gal ends up arresting like all the other protagonists, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that they all have to like work against him at some point, and it's such a mess, and it just kind of gets to the tone problems the movie has, because like the movie just like runs from being, I mean, it's jokey throughout there, and I think it's actually pretty good at being consistent in that, but all ages or adult humor, and then it veers to Raul Julia giving like a third grade level moral,
right.
Work together, kids.
Yeah, there's some very funny, fourth wall breaking type moments and throughout that definitely make this a movie I can appreciate now more as a grown up than I did, back then.
Yeah, and honestly, I still did find it to be a very funny movie. It's just that it didn't. It's like one of those movies that you remember in moments rather than as a whole. But that leads me to talking about the worst part of the movie, which is easily Van Damme. And there was actually recently a Guardian article that came out about like how basically Van Damme was running through thousands of dollars worth of coke while making this movie. It was filmed in Thailand, and apparently the studio like assigned him a handler to make sure that he wouldn't get stoned. But the handler actually ended up becoming an intermediary between him and the drug dealers in Thailand, or something like that. Or maybe I should say all this is alleged.
Alleged, yeah.
Yes.
cover your bases.
Allegedly, but kids, you might not notice, but Van Damme was actually a really big deal at the time this movie got made. I even still remember when he was going to be a guest star on Friends, and I mean, I didn't watch Friends because I'm one of those purists who prefer my sitcoms to have jokes in them, but I still remember like even him appearing in a TV show was like a huge deal that got like all these ads, and then all of a sudden in like 1 year's time he just disappeared.
It's weird how the bottom just fell out of the whole Van Damme train, because yeah, like you say, I mean, he was a superstar, and I don't know, I mean, it's maybe it was just death by 1,000 paper cuts, like there wasn't one moment where suddenly everyone was like, oh, we don't like Van Damme anymore, but it was just this gradual drop.
I don't know. Do you think that, because like I said, Gao is kind of a big wet blanket in the movie. He interferes with all the other protagonists' actions. There's some basis for that characterization in the game, but he's just like this ultra straight man in an otherwise fun and adventurous movie, and he doesn't fit. So I was curious if you think that that's Van Damme, or do you think that the character was or do you think it was a problem with the writing?
I mean, I think there's plenty of blame to go around, I mean, I think I don't think the writing did Van Damme any favors, but I don't think Van Damme did Van Damme any favors.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not Olivier. Like, it's just, he can't elevate material like this. I mean, what you needed was someone who understood the tone and who played to that. I mean, I think the best thing about the old 1960s Batman show is that Adam West understood the exact right tone to play Batman. Like, he had to play it completely straight, but he had to play it straight in a way that let the audience know he was in on the joke.
Right.
and that's very tricky, you know, like Adam West doesn't get enough credit for how effectively he was able to do that. And you know, Van Damme is no Adam West. You know? Yes. I mean, he wasn't even playing playing the part as written, because you know, it's all just a mess. I mean, that speech that he gives near the end is like, that's like one of the all-time great movie speeches for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, very stilted, and also like the moment that really turned me against his character as well. Okay, his plot is that he's, you know, he wants to overthrow Bison, but Bison's also holding his friend Charlie captive. And in the games, Charlie is Gal's friend that M. Bison murdered. But in the movie, Charlie and Blanca are the same character because M. Bison is turning Charlie into a super soldier, which involves him becoming buff and green. Like, I don't think he even displays any of the electrical powers that Blanca has in the game.
No.
As part of the process, Charlie's being fed all this violent imagery, which includes the famous, and this is something else that you're probably glad your kids didn't pick up on.
Right.
Is, the actual image of a man being shot in the head during the Vietnam War. Which I don't know if they slipped that in there by accident or it was deliberate, but yeah, that's in there. A man getting killed in real time is in the Street Fighter movie, folks. Yeah, that's another bit of trivia I had to put in. Yeah, John Wayne Gacy reference in Man Getting Shot. Dhalsim, who they kind of shoved in there as a scientist, again, like all these different characters are just like basically in name only, just so that they could get them in. So Dhalsim is a scientist, and he, you know, tries to interfere with the process and gives Charlie these happy images to try to turn him good, because, you know, that's how that works. Anyway, when the heroes converge upon M. Bison and are on the verge of defeating him, Gal sees his friend on the ground, you know, mumbling, slightly deformed, but not really. You know, he has green skin, he's naked, but it's like his first instinct is to kill him.
Right. I know. It reminds me of that Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns is turned into an alien, or they think he's an alien. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
And they're like, kill him! And then Smithers is like, wait, it's Mr. Burns! And then Willie's like, oh, it's Mr. Burns. Kill him!
It's exactly like that, but it's done seriously. But it also causes an explosion, which, and I think I mentioned this last time, but Dhalsim was supposed to get, when they were going to make a sequel, that was how Dhalsim was supposed to get his stretchy powers, was from that lab explosion.
Interesting.
So like, I guess they were trying to do the movie as like an origin story for all these characters, but I mean, right. It really is like in name only. Zangief is a dope, even though in the games he's not. And also in the movie, he doesn't get to dance with Boris Yeltsin, which is another massive
lost opportunity.
Yeah, because you know Boris Yeltsin would have done it. I mean, he was in a Pizza Hut commercial. Why couldn't he have?
Just open a bottle of vodka near him, and he would have followed the scent.
Oh wait, no! I'm not. Oh, I am so dumb. I didn't mean Boris Yeltsin. I meant Gorbachev.
Gorbachev.
Yeah. That's what I get for trying to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Gorbachev was doing commercials. That's right. Good call. Yeah, Yeltsin.
Yeah. Although I guess it would have. Yeah, they could have done Yeltsin instead, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess the question is, of the two adaptations Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, which one do you think is better?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think Mortal Kombat is a better movie than Street Fighter, but that's not to say Mortal Kombat is a good movie.
Right.
Right. So there's that nether region in the middle that Mortal Kombat occupies. I think it's a truer depiction of the world of the game. I think it does a better job. And obviously, Liu Kang is much better suited to be the main. I mean, that's the interesting thing, because Mortal Kombat, I never got the sense from the game that there really was like a main character. You have like the good guys, but you know what I mean? But situating it around Liu Kang makes a lot more sense. And it to a certain extent, it's progressive in the sense that, they had the balls with Mortal Kombat to do what Street Fighter couldn't, which was to have an Asian character as the lead.
That's an excellent point.
And it wasn't that much later. It was like 6 months later. So I think Mortal Kombat's a better movie, but it's I would only recommend it under very specific circumstances. The CGI in Mortal Kombat is just abysmal.
Yeah.
The special effects are really terrible. I mean, Goro looks awful.
I mean, I would at least agree that Mortal Kombat is the better adaptation.
Yeah. I mean, Street Fighter feels like they took some of the IP affiliated with the license, and they threw those labels onto various things, and they kind of made it like, oh, it's like the thing that but it's that's the other thing. The Street Fighter doesn't have an overarching mythology in the game. It's a fighting game. It's a button smasher,
Yeah.
So it's
well, not
harder.
At that point. It's
Right.
gotten more complicated.
Now it has, but when the movie came out, I mean, there wasn't a myth. Yeah, now I agree. I mean, there's a world that exists, and I feel like that's almost an outgrowth of what happened with Street Fighter, which was essentially the movie. I mean, which is Capcom being like, we're gonna take charge of creating a mythology so that nobody else screws it up again. Which that didn't work out for them either, because they did that other Street Fighter movie like 10 years ago, and that was, that's a separate episode of this show for you, Chad.
Yeah, but I guess that's another question, is this movie better than Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li?
Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li is completely unwatchable, so yes. So this is better by virtue of that.
Yeah. Do you agree with the? Because I don't remember who originally said it. Maybe multiple people have said it spontaneously, but I've often heard that this movie is a better G.I. Joe adaptation than Street Fighter adaptation. And I know you're a pretty big fan of the G.I. Joe franchise. Do you think that's true? At least.
I mean, it has the structure of what could be a G.I. Joe-esque adventure.
Mm-hmm.
But my issue with that analysis is that for me personally, my egress into G.I. Joe has always been the comic books by Larry Hama that were first published by Marvel and are now at IDW, and he took a much more I don't want to say mature, because I mean it's not mature, but he took a more grounded approach to it, and he more so than the cartoon show, which was real bonkers. So I would say that the Street Fighter movie is a pretty good approximation of a live action version of the 1980s G.I. Joe syndicated animated series. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And the funny thing is that also in the time, not only did I buy Street Fighter V, but I also happened to watch a movie called Dead or Alive. And I know you're not as big into video games as you used to be, but have you ever heard of the Dead or Alive franchise?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's another fighting game franchise that's kind of infamous for its TNA content.
I see.
But it and also Ryu Hayabusa from the Ninja Gaiden series is in it too.
Wow.
That's his other claim to fame. But they actually did a movie based on it, and I have no idea how it got made, because I think like even people who are fairly hardcore gamers aren't really into the Dead or Alive series, so I don't know what their target audience was. But I watched it, and Eric Roberts was the villain, of course.
Of course.
That made the movie worthwhile, so if you want to see it, I do recommend it. But it actually had different fighters from around the world converging on one location, and it had like these goofy scenes where like this one woman is parachuting out of a jet, and like out of nowhere this kind of a ninja star type thing flies at her, and she grabs it, and it's like the invitation to the tournament. Just like Bachler stuff like that. And they all go to the tournament, and it turns out that the host of the tournament has like this elaborate plot to record their fighting moves and incorporate it into his own, download it into his own brain. Is like really beyond comic book style plot. But, you have diverse characters. They're participating in a martial arts tournament. There's something bigger behind it, but, that's still basically the premise. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a better adaptation of Street Fighter than Street Fighter the movie.
That's hilarious.
So I guess if you want to see a live-action adaptation of G.I. Joe the cartoon, see Street Fighter. But if you actually want to see a adaptation of Street Fighter, see Dead or Alive.
Makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I guess that's a good point to leave off. Thank you again so much, Zaki, for being on and for putting up with all the missed efforts to record our second episode. And hopefully this time everything will go fine. And tell the good folks at home where to find you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you can find me at my website, zakiscorner.com. That's ZAKIS corner. That's also my Twitter. That's also my Instagram. You can also find me at various podcasts, including the Movie Film Podcast, which drops 2 to 3 times a month. There's also the Nostalgia Theater Podcast, which usually has 1 episode a month, and then Diffused Congruence, the American Muslim Experience, which is once a month, and also I'm a panelist on Discovery Debrief, which drops in time to new episodes of Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, nice. And I am Chad Denton. You can find me on YouTube. My show, Hollywood Hates History, as well as Before Stonewall, are up on my channel there. And you can also find me at trashculture.blog on WordPress. And also check out my LGBT superhero series, John and Namar, also on WordPress. Thank you for joining us. Have a good one.